دختر تلفنی نوشته اسکات مکلاناهن به تازگی توسط نشر آژمان با ترجمه فرشاد سهرایی وارد بازار کتاب ایران شده. این کتاب شامل مجموعه از داستان‌های کوتاه از این نویسنده است که خودش این داستان‌ها رو آغازی بر نویسندگی حرفه‌ایش میدونه. از دیگر کتاب‌هایی که توسط این نویسنده در ایران ترجمه و منتشر شده میشه به آپالاچی‌های آشغالی و همچنین کتاب سارا اشاره کرد. در ادامه مصاحبه من با اسکات مکلاناهن که از ویرجینیای غربی ایالات متحده مهمان ما شده رو مشاهده می‌کنید.
So, shall we begin?
Yeah, that's perfect. And it looks like it's recording on my end too, so we're good to go.
Yes. First, I appreciate that you took your time and for doing this. That's very great. And for start, I would like to ask you to give our audience a short introduction, whatever you like, and who is Scott Macclanahan?
Okay, that's like a question out of Hamlet. I think that's the first line out of Hamlet, which is "Who's there?" So that might be a dangerous question to ask. But I'm Scott McClanahan, and I'm an American writer. I guess I can say I'm an American. I'm a West Virginia writer, which maybe there's something slightly different with that. And I've written a couple of books: the Sarah book, Crapalachai, and the Collected Works. Which is kind of a joke title. So hopefully that's good.
No, I have read it. It's wonderful. Do you live in Beckley? Did you live all your life in Beckley?
Well, I grew up probably like an hour away from here in Greenbrier County. Beckley, I'm trying to think of, like, it's a little small town. I think there's 15,000 people in Beckley. There may not even be that many. This is a really, I live in West Virginia, which is like mountains. So it's like incredibly like rural. And where I'm from in Raynell, like an hour away from here, it's even more rural. So Beckley's kind of like the satellite town that all these other towns in the southern part of the state kind of bleed into. So yeah, I've been here since 2005, I want to say. So it's been a long time since I've been in Beckley.
And did you go to college or?
Yeah, actually, and again, I'm sounding like a country mouse here, but I went to college like an hour away from Beckley as well, at a little college called Concord College. Which is a little small liberal arts school. If you want to be a school teacher in West Virginia, it's like the school that you go to. So yeah, and then I got a master's degree from Marshall, which is in Huntington, West Virginia, which is a much bigger place. So
it says on your Wikipedia page that you are a filmmaker and you have a band, Holly Brothers.
Yeah. We've it seems like I used to do a lot more of that sort of stuff than I do now, where I'm just more writing books. But yeah, we tried to be rock stars for a while, and it didn't quite work out. And yeah, we've made some little documentaries, and just here recently, some of these books we're trying to turn one into a TV show, which I hate saying. It's like that's what all writers do now, is they turn their crappy books into crappy TV shows. So some of that continues, but mostly I'm just working on books.
So did you always want to be a writer?
That's a good question. I mean, I think I did. Like, I always had like a feeling inside of myself. I can remember being in first grade, and there was light coming from the window. It was like an October day, and October in the States is, our autumn season. And I can remember thinking as a first grader, like, all of this is going to pass, we're all going to be gone one day. I can remember having that melancholy of a thought as a first grader. And so, yeah, I think that impulse was there, but maybe that's just a human impulse. Maybe we all kind of have those things. But at a certain point in time, I guess it did turn into a compulsion. We had a horrible blizzard here, and 1993. So how old would I have been in 1993? I would have been, let's see, almost 14 years old. I've been a little bit older than that. Yeah, I would have been 14 probably when the blizzard happened. And I can remember deciding I wanted to write poetry, which
Oh,
is like a weird thing for a kid probably from West Virginia to have. I made my mom take me to the library when the snow kind of went down enough to
so
I
poetic.
I checked out Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, and of course understood very little about it. But from that point on, I was kind of starting to write, and it's just kind of continued. It's continued on from there. So I was that precocious weird kid that liked to write. That was me.
So we could say that poetry inspires you. Walt Whitman
Oh
poetry.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
I was a big, even just up until fairly recently, probably within like the last 6, 7 years, I've stopped reading poetry in the way that I once did. Um, like some of my favorite writers are still poets. But now I think I just read mostly prose. Maybe because I got to know a lot of poets.
Mhm. You're a
That
lot of
might be it.
poet
So it
friends.
made me stop reading made me stop reading poetry.
Um, but I think that me too. I feel you really here because I think poetry always inspires a lot of people. And it's also when you're a kid and you just see these literary works from these poets, and then you just want to do something with it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also with poetry, I think what kind of my distaste with it over the past decade is my wife often says this, it's like it's the hardest form, but it's also the easiest form. So you have everyone kind of writing their poetry. And yeah, I know poems by heart though, like, from childhood that
Mhm.
still stick with me. So
So you ever gonna publish a poetry work?
no,
No.
I have no interest in poetry anymore. For some reason, the things that I'm interested in, have always been stories, even within when I was writing poetry. My poetry was kind of narrative in some sense,
Mhm.
where I was telling a story within that. And then I was just able to jump into the prose, which feels so much, I don't know, it feels more connected to the human voice, I guess. We have this thing in the United States that we call poetry voice, and you can always tell you're at a bad poetry reading when somebody's reading in poetry voice. And the voice is, gather ye rosebuds while ye may. It's just the complete voice that's not even connected to the human voice. It's like this, it's like this pretentious
Yes, it is.
sort of thing. So I like to be able to write in connection to the way that I sound when I talk. So
Mhm.
yeah.
I think you did it great. As I was reading your collected works, who has been translated by Farshad Sahraei, and I felt like the narrative is the author himself. Is it true? And I think that West Virginia plays a very big role in this stories.
Yeah, I think so. Like place has always been important to me, but I've always thought of, like, how can I even say it? Like, the places only exist though because the people exist, right? Our
Mhm.
ideas about places are because a human being, existed in those places and made us think of those places as, special. And there's this term that we use called psychogeography. It's kind of a postmodern concept that I'm incredibly interested in the way that the way that we represent place through an individual. But mostly it's just these are just stories from my life,
Mhm.
um, and the things that have happened to me, and like the simplicity of that is what I was kind of going after there. But yeah, West Virginia is totally important for sure.
Yes, it is. And how many of your books, or specifically these books, collected works, have been yes, you have said it, but were they based on your life experiences, or?
Yeah, I think so, right? I mean, I think that even all fiction is like autobiographical at its best. Like I truly believe in that. I mean, I've kind of got to the point now though where I'm starting to write in third person a little bit more. Um, because I don't know if I believe in the first person anymore either, you know. Like is Kiana, or you have a mother, you have a father, like we're all just kind of extensions in this weird genetic kind of meat chain that we're all a part in. So I've been trying to go back and write in third person more so about like my mother's stories, about great grandparents I didn't even know, but I know their stories, right? And so I've been trying to make those work for me. The stories from my mother, like, the stories that I grew up hearing about people who were like characters in movies to me. And so yeah, I think even third person writing is I used to be against third person writing. But now I can see that third person writing could be like incredibly personal.
Yes. So, based on what you said, you have new books coming out, or?
Yeah, I'm working on a big family book that like takes place over 100 years. Starts in 1935 in a coal camp around here, and then finishes up in 2016. So I'm going to tell all of my grandparents' stories, or my great grandparents' stories, how my grandparents met. I'm going to then tell you about my mother, and then I get born at the end of the book.
Wow.
So we'll see if it works. It might be a disaster. No one's read it. Like I haven't even. My wife, she's been waiting to read it as well. But I think I'm going to finish it up here within the next month or so. So we'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see.
I'm personally can't wait to read it.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And so, do you have other projects too, like filmmaking?
Well, like right now we're trying to get a TV show made with FX. That's a network over here.
Yes, I know.
And it's owned by Disney.
Oh.
So that's been going out of my book Crapalachai, which I think has also been translated into Persian a couple years ago.
Yes.
And that's probably been like 5 years has it been that long? 4 years. 4 years we've been working on that. But who knows if it'll ever get made. It very well may not. So
I hope so.
yeah, well, right now I'm just like concentrating on the books. It's been a weird year, I think, for everybody, and it's been nice to have something that feel like I like literature that has like a purpose to it. Like there's a famous like French writer Montaigne who says like I'm leaving this book for my generations, and like I kind of feel that way. Like I'm just writing this book so that if I happen to die here within the next 6 to 12 months, my children will have those stories. Like the stories won't die out. Like they'll still exist in at least book form.
You mentioned a pandemic. How was it like for you, personal life, writing life?
Well, I teach, so I've done a lot of this over, we use Zoom, which I think is a little bit, if you have a large group of people, I think it's a little bit easier than Skype with large groups of people. This is better, one-on-one. And we're to the, West Virginia's went through some hard, we had the opioid epidemic here. Yeah, it's American capitalism run amok. We started manufacturing, opioid painkillers that were marketed in this area. So we've been losing population for a number of years. And even I teach at a little community college where most of the people who are going there are going to get their nursing degree. And so, Yeah. So, because that's one way that you can stay in West Virginia right now. You either have to be a public school teacher or you have to work in the medical field, just because there's no jobs in West Virginia. And so, it's been rough, like the fear of like, am I going to have a job? Like, but our school's still going. Here in the States, we've started. I'm vaccinated. My wife's vaccinated. My ex-wife's vaccinated. My parents are vaccinated. So everybody within our orbit, or at least vaccinated. But yeah, man, it's been scary. That's for sure. It's been scary. So.
Yeah, and how do you think this pandemic has affected readers population?
Oh yeah, I don't know. It seems like more people may be reading. We have so many weird things, and I don't know if Persian book culture similar. I have a book translated into Germany. I have another book coming out at the end of May, translated into German. I was shocked to see how similar like German book culture is to book culture here in the States, where there's something kind of icky about it. It's such a corporate sort of undertaking, um, that the good readers are always in the minority, right? They're really like searching for something and looking for a connection rather than just entertainment. That's what a lot of fiction, typically tends to do. So, those good readers are always out there, but they're few and far between. But I don't want to be, I don't want to sell 1 million books. It would be nice if I did, but I mean, could you imagine? It's like knowing 1 million people. Like that's just, you can't put your mind, get your mind wrapped around that. Nor should you. My career's always been kind of small. I've been more of a cult figure in the United States. And so I get to like talk to people like you, right? Then that's what I've always wanted, is something that's personal and that feels that feels like you can know a person through a book. So
Exactly. Right. So how is teaching for you? Do you like this job or?
yeah, I mean, I kind of stumbled into it. It's one way that I've been able to support myself, so that I could write the way that I want to write. Um, I don't know, some of the greatest, I don't know, war criminals have been teachers. Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s, he started out as a school teacher. I could go down the list. Chairman Mao, I think, was a librarian. Right. So imagine having an overdue library book that you had to take back to Chairman Mao. So so there is a part of teaching that I feel like I get a little burnt out with it. But I think that it's been helpful in a number. It allows you to be able to speak in front of a group. It allows you to realize that people are really simple. Like in my classes, there are people who are smarter than me. 18-year-old kids who are probably smarter than me, more attractive than me, physically stronger than who I am. But you tell them to take out a piece of paper and a pencil, and you know what they do? They take out a piece of paper and a pencil, right? And probably nursing similar as well, right? Where there's a sort of kind of power dynamic in those relationships, which is healthy for a writer, because that's a power dynamic. Even though writing and reading, some way, kind of a passive sort of act. You have to direct the reader where you want them to go, and sometimes the effect that you're trying to get out of the reader, because all the emotions are in the reader anyway. You just have to kind of manipulate those emotions. But sometimes you have to bang them over the head in order for them to understand where the narrative is going from that point on.
That was an interesting point of view. I agree. So go back to your collective works, this book. Do you have a favorite story among other stories?
It's been so long ago since I wrote that book. It's strange to think of it. That was kind of my breakthrough as a writer, where I've been writing, all these years, but it wasn't until I was, 28, 27 years old that I realized, like, this is what I do. Right? This sounds like me, which it seems like it's kind of silly to think about, but it takes you a long time to figure out how you sound, especially when you're writing, or to figure out, it takes a long time for you to figure out what you really care about, and the things that have some sort of, emotional weight for yourself. And I found that out in that book. And I used to sit down. I can remember it was summer when I started writing those stories. And I sort of thought that would be my only book. And it was like, if I die, right, what do I want out there? And these are the stories that happened to me, that I told at parties and people laughed, or that people kind of got grossed out by, or whatever. And I sat down at my now ex-wife's kitchen table here in Beckley in the summer, and I would do about one a week or one every 2 weeks. And I developed my whole entire technique for how I write now, and I just started cranking them out, and I cranked one after another out.
Wow.
And then sent them off, and of course nobody cares. You found your voice, but nobody cares for a couple of years anyway. So
so you said that it's been a long year. It's been a long year after you wrote these stories. How do you feel about it now when you look back?
I have not. It's probably been
2012.
Yeah, but I've probably read those stories again in their entirety, 2016-ish, and I liked them. They still kind of shock me. They still kind of surprise me. You can tell that it's a writer who doesn't necessarily have my ideas at the time about language, which was I wanted to strip it back. I wanted to strip the language back almost to the point that they didn't feel as if they were written. I don't know if that helped me. In the long run, looking back on it, I wouldn't write those stories the same way again. Like, they would be more ornate, and they would be a little bit more full, right, in terms of the English that's used. But they still pack a punch, or at least they did. Every now and then, I do readings around the country, and every now and then I'll pull out one of those stories and just read to an audience, and they still laugh in the same places, and they still have a power to them, and they're so short. That's what I like about them. They're so short, because American fiction, it's been just for the past 20 years or so, American fiction's been so like, it's like a New Yorker story, it just goes on and on and on and on, and nothing really happens. A lot of stuff happens in those stories within just 1,000 words, which, yeah. So I'm affectionate towards that book. Like, I feel like that book's me in some ways, but maybe I like that guy who wrote it, because most of those stories were probably written in 2008-ish, 2009-ish, 2010-ish. And he was an all right boy. He had a golden heart, I think, at the time. So
Thanks. So do you have a certain routine or a ritual when you write? Or
yeah, I do. And it's stayed the same. Like, it hasn't really changed. How can I even explain it, and without getting it too complicated and boring? I drink the only thing that's changed in the past few years is I drink Red Bull, which is like an energy drink. And I never used to do that. I used to always just drink like a diet soda to get caffeine in order to but I write longhand in a notebook. All my stories or chapters in books are 10 paragraphs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice to kind of have a structure like that you can work inside. Which maybe that gets back to the thing we were talking about at the beginning. That's very poetic, right? A particular form, and then you work inside of a sonnet, or you work inside of, these heroic couplets or whatever that you're writing. So yeah, I mean, I write longhand, and then I just write it again and again and again and again and again, until it feels right to me. Some of it's I don't even, I know a lot of people now who I consider really great writers, and there's so much more, I don't know, like technically skilled, and they can write a sentence. They can write an English sentence with subordinate clauses and subsubordinate clauses and parenthetical clauses. Like, I can't do that. I can't write like Henry James, nor would I want to.
No.
Because I try to get my sentences simple, as simple like a child could write them almost. Because I think like sentences, and maybe this is true in Farsi and other languages as well. Language is like heartbeat to me. It's like music, and the simplicity of it is what's so beautiful about a piece of music. And so I try to keep those sentences as simple as I can. Bump 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 bump. Move on to the next one. Bump 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 bump. Move on to the next one. And I've always done it that way. And I've always done it that because I wanted. This may sound like egomaniacal, but I always wanted to be translated. And the problem with, I think, modern literature is that our really great writers, or English writers, how do you translate Ulysses into another language? I don't know if you can. And so I've been interested not in the language, even though I'm interested in language, but I'm interested in this sort of invisible thing that's a part of the heart and the core of a story. And so I saw myself, if I can keep this as simple and as true to what it is that I love, then someone who is from a completely different world than me will be able to grab a hold of it.
Yeah.
Will be able to hold it themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my plan along the way.
Sometimes some works in Farsi we cannot translate it, and I find it very sad because when you translate these works, it just loses its I don't know, meaning or anything.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah, for some reason, this makes me think of, I had a book last year for German translation. For years, I had people who were interested in translating my books into German, but they said that they couldn't match the way. So here I am thinking I'm doing this really simple thing in English, but they had a tonal issue to put it into German. It would sound completely wrong once it was placed into this other language. So sometimes it's just it's just the kind of tonal sort of quality to the writing that has a difficulty in springing back up in another language. Yeah.
Yes. I really think that translators should know the author very well and the tone too. Then it would work. But for example, your story has been translated, and it's very great now because I think Farshad really understands you good. So.
Well, I think also too, even with Farshad, we have some similar cultural references. Like, he loves the Strokes. I love the Strokes. Like, some of his Western references are my references. Like, that's what I grew up with as well, or was a young man with as well. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So I forgot to ask this. What time in day would you like to write?
For a long while I was probably from about 14 to about 20, I was like kind of a late in the evening writer. But then I stopped that now. And then I became a morning writer for a number of years. the collected works was probably more of an afternoon book. Now I'm usually best between 9 and 2. If I can get my writing in somewhere in between 9 and 2, I work best. And it's been better the past year because of the pandemic. I can kind of work my writing into my schedule because I'm not having to leave the house to go to work. So my class ends, I can just sit on my bed and keep writing. But usually whenever there's like an hour ready, I'm not one of those writers that's precious about the time of day. Like I can do it in the evening, I can do it in the morning, I can do it whenever I have time. But I think it is best. We have a famous American writer, Henry Miller, who said that you should always have a little bit of velvet on the brain.
Oh.
Which meant that he liked to wake up from naps or wake up in the morning and do that, where you're a little bit groggy, you're a little bit still kind of connected to the dream world. You get that boost of caffeine, and and then that's usually when my best work is. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning.
Perfect. Do you have an audience? Do you have a favorite audience? Or who would you like to be your audience?
Oh gosh, yeah, it's a good question. I don't really ever think about audience. I write for myself, and I wish more writers would do that. I think that's oftentimes when books start going off in directions that, when that's the problem with, American literary culture, just American kind of entertainment culture. Everything's like test audience and a demographic. It fits into a demographic, and it has, and that's the reason why I think those works usually start to get kind of distorted. So I'm writing for myself, but in terms of audience, I'm writing for somebody in the future, right? And I'm already dead. Like I think you should write as if you're already dead. And it frees you up in so many ways. Those things that you're not supposed to talk about, you can talk about. Those feelings that you have towards someone or something, well, you can write those because you're already dead. What does it matter? And so I have had that imaginary reader, of the future, who, yeah, I'm wanting to talk to. I'm wanting to say I was here, right? I existed. I was real, in the same way that you exist, and you're real. And I think that's been true of all. I'm trying to think. One of my favorite books is Herodotus, his histories, the Greek historian Herodotus. And of course, he writes. I'm trying to think I think it's Xerxes, right? The Persian king that he's writing about. And there's a great battle that's getting ready. I don't know if the Persians are all the way ready to take on the Greeks yet in the book, but Xerxes looks out over his army and he starts to weep. And because he knows that there's not a man on that field, and there's thousands of men on that field. There's not a man on that field, who will be alive in just 100 years, right? And as powerful as a king there's still that softness there's still that human-like quality within this kind of madman, right? um, and the Greeks as well, right? And being mad as well. But yeah, like the things that still communicate. You can read Herodotus, this weird Greek guy from 400 BC, and because he is thinking that way, then it still communicates. You don't have to understand the period and time in which he's writing about. He's just telling you these anecdotes, and so that's what that's the tone that I've always wanted to do in order to connect with that audience of the future who haven't even been born. So yeah, that's it.
I have read him. I know what you mean. I have read him.
Yeah.
So what is your advice to aspiring writers?
Oh gosh. Yeah, probably the most important thing is don't take any advice. And but with that said, like, the person that's going to write and the person that's going to, do it, they're going to do it anyway, right? Without any no matter what obstacles are kind of put in front of them. But I want to hear about the person, I want to hear about the things that the person cares about, right? That they feel emotionally connected to. Yeah.
You said it already. You said, right, like you are dead.
Yeah, for sure. And but and also maybe I should add to that, but be alive in your deadness. Not like a statue, but like someone who is, as present, as we are right now. Because with those ancient books, that you oftentimes, a lot of times it is just they take on weight over the course of history, and we say that they're important, but a lot of Herodotus is just, hey, I saw this crazy animal. Let me tell you what this crazy animal looked like when I went down to Egypt. Right? And there's nothing better than that. There's nothing better than just the human voice, carrying on over millennia, oftentimes.
Yes. So you wrote a beautiful introduction for our Farshad translation of your stories, and I realized that you know a lot of Iranian artists and poets like Forough Farrokhzad and Abbas Kiarostami. So how come? How did you come to know these people?
I know it's weird, isn't it? I had an Iranian father-in-law for a period of time. Well, he was the stepfather of the woman that I married, Sarah. And he grew up Baha'i in Iran, and then left. He went to London for university, came back, and then left after during the revolution is when finally his family left for good and came to the States. But even before that, I was kind of obsessed with like Iranian film. In Blockbuster, that used to be our big chain store where you'd get movies and rent movies. It was kind of like a Walmart for video rentals. And I can just remember, Kiarostami films and watching them and totally being like, what is this? Right? This is really the story of a little boy who is trying to get some homework, right? And they're really going to show him walking all the way up that hill, right? And they're going to show him coming all the way back down. Like they're going to take the time to show that. And so there's something within that cinema, that I've always loved, which is exactly what I'm talking about with writing. Like, why do those movies work, right? Why do they work for an international audience even? And I think that it's just, whether it's Makhmalbaf or Kiarostami or, whatever, Iranian filmmaker you want to talk about, there's just like a beautiful simplicity though in the heart of a human being, showing you, another human being. And so they always spoke to me. Some of the writers, I discovered later that, my father-in-law did turn me on to, The Conference of Birds, by Attar. And I just recently watched Farrokh's film, The House is Black. Have you ever seen this?
Yes.
Yeah. I've wanted to see it for years. And it's on our Criterion channel, which is like an artsy app now, and you can see art films. And I'd never seen that before. So even within the literature itself, there was something of a storybook quality to it, I mean, I don't know, like the 1001 Nights, right? Those are stories for children, but they're also like stories for adults, right? and and there's just something that I loved about that kind of storybook quality you know, to the literature. So yeah, it's interesting. You know, I had a brother-in-law that went back because he had dual citizenship. I don't think any of my, you know, the people that I knew who were Iranians, you know, Tom Attar, he went back to Iran in 2000 and I don't know when this had been, 2010ish or 2009ish. He made a little documentary for us that we called, yeah, I'll send you the link. It's called Spring 1386. And he just made a little travel log about going back, and he hadn't been back since. He was a little boy. He could remember going to the airport as a little boy. One of his first memories is his father and his mother trying to get him all to the airport, and he'd never been back. And so I guess just because I loved him so much, you know, my brother-in-law, and I just started, you know, I just started to love that culture. And the food, you know, I mean, there's Persian food, like, you know,
favorite?
yeah. And I don't know the names, please forgive me, but there's like a yellowish rice, a dish with yellowish rice that I love.
I think that's
And yeah, probably so. Because now my wife, she grew up in San Diego, and she had a number of Persian friends. She could tell you the names of these dishes that I remember. As I tell you, there's like a yellowish rice. Yellowish rice. But it's what's also fascinating though is, and we've been noticing this, you know, from, you know, Greek food, you know, Turkish food, Persian. There's a backbone to
yes,
those foods that they share that I think is fascinating. That's still, you know, that's still present in 2021 with these incredibly complex and multifaceted societies. But you could see they knew one another once, right? They were kind of family members / enemies once, and they were sharing these things between themselves. So yeah.
very, very informative. Um, so I think I don't have any more questions, but do you have a last word?
I don't think I have a last word. Just thank you for doing this.
Thank you, and it was so great. It's so easy to talk to you, and I have learned a lot.
Oh, well, good. Could you understand me pretty well?
Pretty well.
Okay, because see, I'm West Virginian, so we have really thick accents.
But you
Yeah, other Americans look down on West Virginians. We're like considered hillbillies because our accent is so thick. And so that's what sometimes I've noticed this. I've been working with the Berliner Ensemble. They're putting on one of my books as a play. It's a theater in Berlin. And these are all English-speaking Germans, but I can tell sometimes when I get on Zoom calls or Skype calls with them, halfway through, I don't think they know what I'm even talking about. There's something about the accent that like completely throws them, and so after a while, they're just kind of nodding politely as I continue on. So hopefully my accent wasn't so thick that it didn't throw you off.
And it was so easy to talk to you, and I really enjoyed this.
Okay, well, good.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you
So much.
Okay.